So friends, when it comes to the proteins that carries and transports thyroid hormone in the circulation, three proteins comes into the picture: thyroid binding globulin, thyroid binding prealbumin, also called as transthyretin, and just albumin. Out of these three, thyroid binding globulin takes a huge importance and maximum percentage in binding and transporting thyroid hormones. So people, thyroid binding globulin carries practically 80% of thyroid hormones, alright? Out of all the thyroid hormones, 80% is carried by thyroid binding globulin. Transthyretin carries on an average of 10%, while albumin carries another average of 10%. So practically 80% of thyroid hormones are seen in combination with thyroid binding globulin. Now, when it comes to levels of circulating hormones, T3 has got comparatively less affinity with binding proteins than T4. The affinity of T4 to binding proteins are far greater than the affinity of T3 for binding proteins, and hence when it comes to the binding proteins, much of the T4 is seen in combination with binding proteins, and comparatively less amount of T3 is seen in combination with binding proteins. So why this binding proteins? Why is it so important? If you could able to remember our discussion of iodine in thyroid hormone synthesis, we were talking about the importance of albumin in iodine. You remember, doctors? The iodine which are in combination with albumin are escaping out of the excretion by kidneys. Those iodine molecules which are not in combo with albumin or get easily excreted by kidneys. So in one word, protein binding prevents a molecule from getting filtered in glomerulus and excreted in kidneys. You know, the basics of glomerular filtration tells us that proteins are not getting filtered in glomerulus, which is why molecules that are in combination with proteins are not getting filtered. Just because they are not getting filtered in glomerulus, they are not getting excreted easily. So people, the importance of plasma protein binding for any hormone or any substance for that matter is their levels in blood is going to be very high and the quantity that gets excreted is getting less. So that's the importance of plasma protein binding. And in that sense and scenario, T4, as I was telling you, has got a huge affinity towards plasma proteins compared with the affinity of T3. As a consequence, good amount of T3 gets eliminated and good amount of T4 gets combined with plasma proteins, which again tells us that if you take blood levels of T4 and T3, T4 levels are far greater in blood than T3 because two reasons. Number one, the gland synthesizes more amount of T4. That's point number one. You know that. Am I right? When it comes to synthesis of T4 is greater than T3. Number two, good amount of T4 is seen in combination with binding proteins than T3, and hence the total level of T4 in circulation far exceeds the level of T3 in circulation. So putting all these points in our revision, remember when it comes to plasma protein binding, the advantage of plasma protein binding is it increases the level of circulating hormones. Plasma proteins increases the level of circulating hormones and it decreases hormonal clearance. It minimizes the amount of hormones that gets excreted, alright, it decreases hormonal clearance. Almost 99.98% of total T4 is seen in combined form, just 0.02% of T4 is seen in free form. On the contrary, 99.7% of T3 is seen in combined form, and about 0.3% of T3 is seen in free form, doctors. So to give you the perspective, when it comes to free form, 0.02% of T4 is in free form and 0.3% of T3 is in free form, doctors. That's the magnitude of hormones in free form and the other magnitude of hormones in the combined form, doctors. So comparatively speaking, which hormone, T3 or T4, has got high unbound fraction? The free form is also called as unbound form. The free form is also called as unbound form, and please remember, it is this free form or unbound form which is metabolically active. The metabolically active form of hormones is just free form. On the other hand, if you consider the combined form, the percentage of hormones that are seen in combination with proteins, combined form, are metabolically inert, metabolically not active. Remember that. Alright, doctors. So that's the importance of combined form as well as free form, guys. Now, as we just saw, good amount of T4 is seen in combination with proteins and comparatively less amount of T3 is seen in combination with binding proteins. As a consequence, fraction of unbound T3 is greater than fraction of unbound T4. That's very important. Please remember, fraction of unbound T3 is greater than fraction of unbound T4. But when it comes to T3, T3 is comparatively less in circulation. T3 is comparatively less in circulation. Reason? Because of easy renal excretion. Because much of the T3 is not seen in combination with plasma proteins, good amount of T3 is easily getting excreted by kidneys, doctors. Now, when it comes to thyroid binding globulin, it is not TAG, it is TBG, thyroid binding globulin. Thyroid binding globulin levels are elevated by one of a very important hormone called estrogen. You got to understand this in a kind of deeper way, doctors. This is very important. Estrogen, the hormone, has got two actions on thyroid binding globulin. On one side, estrogen is going to increase synthesis of thyroid binding globulin by liver. It increases synthesis of thyroid binding globulin by liver. That's point number one. And number two, the second important aspect of estrogen in thyroid binding globulin is estrogen decreases metabolism as well as it decreases breakdown. It decreases metabolism and breakdown of thyroid binding globulin.